Welcome to the Winter's Dozen Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Golochner, a.k.a. Carb King. Welcome back, new listeners. Welcome back, new listeners. Welcome, new listeners. Welcome back, old listeners. As you can see, the podcast has changed names to the Winter's Dozen Sports Podcast. There's a couple of reasons for that, which I'll get into. This is going to be hopefully not too long of a podcast, but I'm going to be spelling out what the new look, what the new avenues for the Winter's Dozen podcast is going to go take, what our future looks like, what our past was for the new listeners. I'm trying to brand this podcast to reach a broader audience rather than just the Winter's Dozen loyal fans, as they may be called. But yeah, so essentially, if we can just start from the beginning, this podcast sort of started as a fuck around, a joke for our league, which is the Winter's Dozen, or just Winter's Dozen. 12 of our buddies get together, fantasy football league, simple stuff. And then all of a sudden, as we started, doing the podcast every week, then it grew into, I'll just do advice shows on Sundays. Call them the Sunday Bloody. I'll have a Bloody Mary at 6 a.m. before all the games going on, and do like an advice show. Well, then people started wanting to call in, and a couple of my all the friends from the Winter's Dozen, they start calling in. Well, then it starts to turn into that, and then all of a sudden it turns into another thing, and then here we go. We got 3,000 listens over 47 episodes, which isn't a ton. I understand that, but there's something here. So me and Ty talked about it. Tyler Frings is the other commissioner, who's also on the pod with me quite a bit. So we're just gonna launch a new and improved podcast. We started off with two kind of test podcasts to get it going, because it does take a little bit of effort to be able to talk for 30 minutes at a time. So the first one was good. Second one, well, if you know the King of the North, he was a little too tipsy, and the podcast never really had a direction. So if you listen to the last episode and you're no longer a listener, well, you're not hearing this right now. So but if you're a new listener, please just stick around. What we're going to be trying to do is just make this a general sports podcast where we talk shit. Obviously it's uncensored. Sometimes we're going to be drinking on air, sometimes heavily drinking on air. We're going to try and compose ourselves better than the King of the North did last time. There's a few running jokes within the league, so we're going to try and keep it not league-centric, but to keep the original roots of the podcast, we're going to be having Winter's Dozen Wednesdays. Now, I'm going to be dropping a podcast that is solely focused on Winter's Dozen, the league that launched this podcast. So obviously, the guys that are listening to this, most of you are the loyal listeners, are just the people that either follow the league or are involved in the league. So keep an eye on that. I mean, obviously, we'll have, everyone on. And, well, before we get into what we're going to be doing to promote more listeners for the actual Winter's Dozen people, I just want to reiterate that this is a fantasy football-centric podcast. So I would say a good 60 to 70% of the content is going to be fantasy football related, whether that be draft strategies, just midweek strategies, sit-em, start-em type stuff. DFS, I started to do a DFS segment last, I want to say week 10. I started doing with DFS lineups. And I'm not an expert, so whatever you hear me say, don't take it to heart if you don't want to. I'm not going to be offended. I've noticed that there's a lot of fantasy football quote-unquote experts out there that clearly it is not their full-time job. They want to be Instagram famous by doing these hot takes. There's a few Instagram people that I would like to call out. I'm not going to do it on this podcast just yet, before I alienate the entire fantasy football world. But, they say all these things, and then they charge you $16 or $17 for their ultimate draft pass. And I obviously haven't looked into it, because if you're a new viewer of those specific ones, there's lots of them out there, actually. I want to say there's a couple dozen fantasy experts that obviously it's not their full-time job, and they're just trying to make a buck off of you. So please steer clear of them all. There's a couple really good ones. There's fantasy pros and there's the fantasy footballers. Those guys are legit. And I mean, I take a lot of what they say to heart. They clearly do their research. These other guys, I don't know how to say this lightly, but what they'll do is they'll make all these bold predictions. I've noticed this a lot. They'll make these bold, do not draft James Conner, for instance. And then let's say the first 5 weeks, James Conner is leading the league in rushing and receiving and scored 10 touchdowns. Well, they'll just take that post down. So it's really odd. Or they'll do these fantasy football predictions or these NFL predictions with the over-unders and the spread. Well, then they'll just delete them and re-upload via an edit and say that they got the pick right. I don't know. It's an odd world out there of these phony fantasy. I mean, of all the fucking things you can be a fake person at, like an impersonator of, I don't know what it is with Facebook or Instagram, but it seems like these fringe like interests. I was part of one. I mean, I'm pretty avid bass fisherman. I'm not going to claim that I'm a professional or anything like that, but like you see these weird like little pop-up markets coming up where these guys that clearly are not professionals in said sport are acting like they're professionals. And I don't know what the motivation is or what the reward is for doing so. I mean, I used to think people were trying to get laid doing this stuff, but like who the fuck wants to bang a fake professional bass fisherman? I mean, you might as well be a fake cornhole professional. But these fake fantasy football people, I mean, if you were a professional fantasy football person, is that really something that's going to like be high on your resume anyway? Like, yeah, it's fun for us. 95% of guys do. I mean, obviously I don't want to alienate any of the women that play fantasy football too. I'm not having a statement here. I'm just, announcing facts that it's primarily a male-dominated thing. Who are you impressing with this knowledge? Because anybody who gives a fuck or pays any attention to fantasy football can see right through you. So, hey, if you're a new listener, this is the type of shit you're going to be getting. Just my thoughts, random thoughts. I'm hopefully not going to be podcasting alone all the time. If I want to, I'm just going to throw it up because I have a studio in my house. So I'm just going to be throwing up podcasts randomly when I have the motivation. But to get back to my point, like, I guess it has to work because there's lots of them out there. And I think a lot of them use the same Instagram algorithm because I'm pretty positive like 3 or 4 of them are run by the same person, which is, I guess, brilliant. But also, do you feel good about yourself by fucking duping these people who are just given? I don't know. One part of me is like, well, if you're so fucking gullible to believe it, you might as well lose your money. I heard there's some prince in Nigeria that needs some money too. Dr. Reverend William Johnson III might need some money to get out of jail or, to release some of the winnings that you deserve. I don't know. It's the same concept, though. You just spam a whole bunch of people. You act like a fucking asshole online. I mean, maybe these people are assholes, I guess. There's one guy in particular that I really do not like. Well, maybe I'll get him on the show and me and him can argue. I mean, that's the goal anyway. But yeah, there's my rant for that little section. But yeah, I mean, so again, to get back to the point, if you want legitimate fantasy advice, you can listen here. I do my research. I try to do my best. I'm pretty consistently a decent fantasy football player, I would say. But then again, I'm also not claiming to be an expert. So if you want to have a conversation, I am all ears and I'm willing to listen. I would love to answer questions from my actual heart, not from what people say. So if you have questions, we have an email, wintersdoesn'tffl@gmail.com, where I accept a lot of question and answers, you can always hit us up on Instagram at WintersDozenFFL or on Twitter at WintersDozenFFL. Pretty much the same for everything. So yeah, I mean, I'll have anyone on the podcast if anybody wants to come on and talk. Like I'm all for it. I have a Skype that it has been fixed, according to someone who I just Skyped with. So yeah, that has been fixed. Like not too long ago, my Skype would come through where it sounds like I was Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of. So it would be like, "Get to the chopper." Well, it didn't actually sing it like that. I mean, it was like a deep version of my own voice somehow through some compression. I don't understand what was going on, but like Jeremy, a guy that will be on this podcast frequently, he would listen to me talk, and somehow he would be able to answer these questions of me going, "Well, what do you think of Derrick Henry's big performance?" or something like that. So I would actually have to record my own audio through Logic, which what I use for my primary audio editing software, and then also record his. It was just a clusterfuck and a mess, and it almost made me lose interest in podcasting for a minute because nothing was fucking working. I had audio technicians come look at it, a couple of my buddies that are in the field, and no one could figure it out. So it has been fixed, and guests are now definitely a capability, or a possibility, I should say. But if you're also just a general NFL fan, I try to do my best to keep a unbiased look at the NFL. But I am from Wisconsin. We're based out of Madison. And I just moved here from Green Bay. We're very, very, very loyal Packer fans. So if you're Bears fans or Vikings fans, fuck off. We don't need you to listen to this podcast. So I'm just joking. I'm just fucking joking, guys. Chill the fuck out. Go have a beer over in downtown Chicago or downtown Minneapolis. I don't even know bars. That's how much I care about your guys' cities. Anyway, no, we will. I try and keep that to a minimum. Obviously, if Jeremy's on or Ty's on or anyone else from the Winters Dozen family is on, we may get into some Packers-Bears talk, but we'll try and keep it to a minimum just because, obviously, if you're a listener of a general NFL show or a general sports show, you're not going to want to hear just Packers talk all the fucking time. And I'll try not to, like I said. But, I mean, there's some times where there was an episode last year where I just fucking ranted after Mike McCarthy was just blatantly fucking up plays and blatantly losing games. So then I ranted, and then it just so happens that he was fired like not a week later. So there's a few ranty podcasts where, and I always preface it. I'll always title it semi what the thing is about. So you have the opportunity to skip the podcast if it doesn't sound like something you want. Right now we don't have any ads, which is nice for you, not for us. But we're trying to get there. But when I do that, I will always read the ads right in the beginning or right at the end. I'm not going to be the asshole that reads them right in the middle, so you have to fucking pull your phone back out and skip through them. Because we all know that no one fucking listens to the ads. And if you're an advertiser and you want to advertise on this podcast, you didn't just hear that. So, yeah. Hopefully, you guys won't skip through the ads and use our products. But then again, we might pitch some products that we have on our Redbubble store, which that's fine in my opinion. That comes up in normal conversation. But anyway, that deals with that. Okay, so a little bit of the info of the Winters Dozen Fantasy Football League. So it started off kind of, by happenstance. Oh, is that now 4 or 5? This is 5 years ago now. I think 2014 was our first year where my best friend Ty calls me up and says, "Hey, you want to start a fantasy football league?" And then a week later, we have an online draft. I was at work. I was driving at some point during the first round. Like, it was, by all intents and purposes, it was a clusterfuck of a draft. It got done in like 30 minutes. I mean, it was fine. You know, we had a good time. It was fantasy football. The shit talking was a complete minimum because, you know, half of us knew the people, half of us didn't. I had my buddy from Point Scott, Jeremy, one of my best friends, Devon from high school, like all these friends that were in the original league. Most of them are still in it, but then the next year, Ty wanted a few of his Chicago buddies to join, which was great. So we made it a half live, half online draft. So we had it at Ty's house in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. Then Ty had the great idea of renting a lake house, and all hell broke loose because the first year me and Ty try and come up with ways to make fantasy football a little bit more fun. And I really suggest you do this for your draft party. It doesn't matter, but at the end of the day, it's more fun than drawing names out of a hat. But so the way we determine draft order is much, much different than anybody I've ever seen. Like, we came up with this solely on our own. I think we were drunk in Appleton or something, and we concocted this idea that we would have a competition to determine the draft order. Because, some people don't like the first overall pick. Some people like the 12th overall pick and like that back-to-back. So what we did was we said, okay, well, we'll just have a competition to determine the draft order. So the first year, we're like, all right, well, let's set up a beer pong tournament. That'll be fun. And we'll be able to, everyone plays everyone once. And then I forget how it exactly went. And then you had a record, like a running record. So we had 12 guys. So there's 105. We didn't do the math right away. But if you think about it, we had 144 games of beer pong played. We had several tables going. But like we even did 6-cup beer pong. And then whoever was the best record got the first pick of the draft. So not the first pick of the draft, but the first pick of the pick they wanted, if that makes any sense. So we did basically that, but that took like 7.5 fucking hours. So we axed that for the next year. For the next year, which was last year, we did a thing called the Castle Rock 500, which now hopefully this motivates your fantasy football leagues. We're going to be getting this out early, and we're going to be talking about draft parties and stuff like that, because like that is seriously the most fun thing of fantasy football, is getting together with their buddies, getting to know everybody, and do a live draft. I mean, online's convenient, but live draft is legitimately the best way to do it. So what we did the next year is we're like, well, we got to keep drinking incorporated, because what's fantasy football without drinking? It's like, what's peanut butter without jelly? I couldn't think of a funny analogy. Mind you, forget it. Fuck it. Just fuck it. I'm not a comedian. Anyway, so we have a go-kart at our disposal up at the lake house, and what we did was we lined everyone up. Everyone got a chance to do 3 laps. It was about, I don't know, maybe 300-yard laps, maybe 400 yards. And you had to finish 3 full complete laps while finishing 2 beers at some point. And there were penalties added in, like spilling beer, going into the grass, stuff like that. We had a lot of penalties associated with it, and we just had a running clock. That went over well. A couple of guys who shall remain nameless showed up really fucking late, so we had, a lot of time to be drunk and stuff like that. But anyways, that went over really well. Now this year, I'm still not going to announce it. Obviously, I fucked with you guys the last podcast. If you're a new listener and you didn't listen, I didn't announce it purposely. The end of the podcast, I acted like there was technical difficulties, and I'm still not going to announce what it is. I'm just letting you know it involves more of an athletic prowess this year, not just driving. So this year is going to top all other years. I promise you that. Ty's going to be on soon, and we will announce that officially in the coming days. So, let's see. Yeah. So if I'm telling you guys one thing, if you take one thing away when you're, starting a fantasy football league or want some advice, besides the logistics and the statistical stuff of fantasy football, run a fucking live draft, first of all. And second of all, do a game, do some fun thing to determine draft order, because like a lot of people like that shit, and it is just an absolute blast. We had NASCAR theme last year. The year before that, we just had random basketball jerseys. But like, yeah, you could do all sorts of things with it. And I personally think it's my favorite part of the whole fantasy football experience at Winter's Dozen. So also what we do is we stem another. This league grew up a lot. We have a baseball fantasy league, which I'm not a part of. I'm not really into baseball much, but we have a baseball fantasy league, which stemmed off of football. It's also named Winter's Dozen. And we have a minor league system where we test out things that we may implement the year after. We talk about it and we decide what worked, what didn't. So last year, what we did was we axed kickers and we added a second flex. So we had 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, and 2 flex. That was pretty cool. I like the no kickers for sure. I mean, I'm not a kickers fan. Obviously, we have a segment on our Winter's Dozen Instagram page where Jeremy selects a kicker by random chance every week, which is super fun, proving that kickers don't fucking matter because he still finished 3rd last year, and he was clearly the number 1 team all season. But doesn't matter. TJ fucking balled out the last few weeks and walked away as the two-time heavyweight champion of Winter's Dozen. Right after the Golden Deucel, mind you, which is our loser's trophy that TJ so lovingly won 3 years ago. 2 years ago? 1 year ago. Yeah. Whatever. So, yeah. No, kickers don't fucking matter. I'm not even going to bring them to a vote because it was like 9-3 in favor of kickers. We had some guys trying to say why kickers matter and kickers are an important position. Well, yeah, I don't deny that, but punters are too in NFL standards. But in fantasy football, it is just way, way, way too much of a fucking wild card to determine games. Like, I mean, your best kicker could score 3 points, but his team could have 45 because of 2 defensive, whatever. You know how it is. Obviously, the math doesn't really work out there, but you know what I'm saying. They could all kick all extra points and have 6 points. And then the worst kicker in the league, like Aldrich Rosas last year, I think his name was. If I remember correctly, that name kind of rings a bell. But I think he had a game where he kicked like 7 field goals or 6 field goals and had like 25 points. And that caused Ty to go to the playoffs. Now, granted, you know, he won fair and square, but like that type of shit doesn't really belong in fantasy football, in my opinion. I mean, obviously there's always going to be random events happening, but you can control it much, much easier with all the other positions, minus kickers. I mean, defenses even, you have an argument that defenses don't matter as much. And I would say that they don't matter just as much as kickers don't matter, but that's besides the point because you can still grab a defense that has a favorable matchup and there's a good chance that defense will prevail. Like, let's say the Baltimore Ravens defense is going up against Nathan Peterman. Now, I don't know if Nathan Peterman's still in the league. I doubt it, but you're going to have a good chance of getting 6 or 7 interceptions and a couple defensive touchdowns. So that would be a positive. But if you're talking about Justin Tucker has a favorable matchup against the Dolphins, why? Why does he have a favorable matchup? Like, yes, he's probably the best kicker in the league, but it doesn't you can't ever gauge when he's going to have a good game. At the end of the year, yeah, it'll probably show that he's near the top just because he's an accurate kicker. That is the one defense. But again, I digress. So, let's see. Oh, okay. So, this was a random idea that Ty had that I absolutely love. This is Winter's Dozen Alert. Winter's Dozen Alert. I might actually come up with a drop and drop that down every time we're about to do a strictly Winter's Dozen related segment because you people in the interwebs do not want to listen to our league, which is fine. Or maybe you do want to follow it. And maybe we'll make little bobbleheads of each league member and put them up for store. Maybe we'll become that big sometime. I doubt it, but maybe you'll become fans and we can get rooting interests in whoever is the best fans, whatever. That is just a dream I am having. Little Carb King bobblehead sitting at your desk. Yeah, I can dream. Anyway, Winter's Dozen Alert. Winter's Dozen Alert. So for you fuckheads that always bitched about me not having certain people on the podcast, me only having Jeremy and Ty on, me only having Jordan on. I have an open invite. Anybody who wants to be on the podcast, all you got to do is reach out, say, hey, I want to be on the podcast. I want to talk about X. It's that fucking simple. We all have these weird little computer things in our pockets at all times called a cell phone. You can text me. You can Snapchat me. You can hit me up on Instagram. You can hit the league up on Instagram. You can hit up any one of us, and you can be on the podcast. It takes 2 fucking minutes. So, in order to curb that, the announcement that we are having is we are going to designate, besides Ty and I, and probably Jeremy, because Jeremy's on constantly, so I'm not even going to include him, or Ty. We are going to have 1 week, and I will determine this before the draft even starts, 1 week of you being on the podcast on Wednesdays. Now, you can be on multiple times. I don't care. But I'm going to have every single one of you. So what is that? 9 weeks? 9 weeks of strictly Winters Dozen interviews. And this gives you time to prepare for what you want to say. Talk to me about what you want to say. Tell me who you want to call out. All that. So I will be comprising a list of the draft party, or at the draft party, and which weeks you guys have. So there is no surprise, I can't make it today, or surprise, I can't do this. Obviously, stuff comes up, I get it. You can't sit on the fucking computer and talk fantasy football. I understand. But do your best to be on the podcast when you're scheduled to be on the podcast. And it will, that hopefully what that's going to do is grow our audience a little more, because you're going to be like, hey guys, guess what? I'm on this fucking dope-ass podcast called Winters Dozen Sports Podcast. Right? Is that what it's called? Yeah, I renamed it. The Winters Dozen Sports Podcast. Give me a listen, and then you'll have 5 of your buddies listen in. And guess what? They're like, oh, this is actually kind of a dope podcast. I want to hear what it's like next week. Oh, shit. They have fantasy football advice, too? Oh, shit. They talk about the NBA. They talk about fucking Kawhi Leonard, Paul George trade. Well, let's give it a listen. Whatever. You know what I'm saying? So hopefully that'll grow it a little bit, and you guys are all required. That is part of your league entry. And this will deny any bitching that goes on. And all of you are fucking welcome to be on before the draft. So we can, this is what I'm very much encouraging for Winters Dozen Wednesdays up until the August 17th, Saturday, August 17th, draft party. You can get there Friday at the same location as it has been the last 3 years. Well, this will be in year 3. So yeah, talk about what you want changed. I know several of you have, talked about maybe changing this, changing that. I'm all for it. Hit me up and we can talk about it. So everyone's prepared, but come draft time, because by the time the fucking draft actually rolls around, I hate to break it to you guys, but we're all going to be pretty fucked up. So you guys need to corral me. I know Randy likes to talk and likes to tell me what I'm doing wrong, which is fine. I enjoy it. I welcome it. Now you guys can all tell me what I'm doing wrong before we're too drunk and before I forget, inevitably. There we go. That's better. So yeah, that's a Winters Dozen update. I think that does it for the Winters Dozen update. Maybe not. Just 1 second. Let me think about it. Oh yeah, we have a Devon update. For those of you who don't know, this is another Winters Dozen update, solely Winters Dozen. For those of you who don't know, we have been drafting beer sponsorships. And what this entails is that you will be wearing an article of clothing, paint it on your face, tattoo your ass, I don't give a shit. Something of the beer you drafted must be on your person. Now that could be just dressing up in the colors and writing the name on permanent marker on your fucking forehead. I don't give a shit. But something of that beer must be on your body in some way. We're going to keep the NASCAR theme of last year, but this year we're going to be actually wearing our sponsorships rather than just a random NASCAR t-shirt. So that's cool. Devon has been on the clock for almost 2 months now, picking out his beer. I text him today, yo, I'm assuming you're back for WD12 this year, August 17th draft. Oh, I am. So he answers right away. We've been bugging him for a while. Just making sure. Don't you worry. Okay, Devon, I wasn't worried. What's your beer? The people are asking. Devon says, lattes and cold snacks. 3-3 split. We all said just pick a 6-pack. Devon obviously has to fucking be complicated. So Devon, we're making a special exception for you. You can have your fucking beer. You can have your Nantucket cold snacks. You can have your Busch Lights. There. Are you fucking happy? As long as you pick something. This is all we wanted. A text. We've been waiting for months. Vegas odds had you picking Busch Light at minus 10,000. So we knew you were going to pick that at some point. Montucky was probably right there at minus 500. So thank you for letting us all wait. Hanson, Zach, you're on the clock. Huff, fucking pressure him. You are on the clock too. It's not the beer mile. We're not doing a beer mile. Okay? I know you said you would be dropping out of the league if we did the beer mile. We're not doing a beer mile, but athletics are involved. That's all I'm going to say. Train up hard. Whew. I think that about does it for this podcast. So for those of you who are not members of the Winter's Dozen that just listen, can you give us a fucking comment on our Instagram page? Because I just want to know who's all listening, because I know we get a lot of random ass listeners, because I sure as hell know Randy's not fucking listening to this episode 5 or 6 times. And same goes for most of you, because I'm a fucking annoying ass human being and my voice cannot be repeated constantly in your ear holes. So just if you're listening to this, let us know on Twitter at Winters Dozen FFL. Let us know on Instagram at Winters Dozen FFL, or email me if you so choose. I know you're not going to, but if you so choose, email me at wintersdozenffl@gmail.com. Yeah, this is going to be a fun fucking time. So, and also, if you guys have any suggestions on topics, I would love to rant about it. I'd love to talk about it. If you want to be on the podcast, again, email, Twitter, Instagram. DM us. Slide into those fucking sweet DMs that you're all just loving. So there you go. That does it for the technically first episode of the Winters Dozen Sports Podcast. I think it's the 50th overall episode of the Winters Dozen Podcast, formerly the Winters Dozen Podcast. Wow, I don't think I fucking took a single breath in like 25 minutes, however long this has been going on. Oh shit, 32 minutes. Yeah, this is about normal. Keep them about 30 minutes. When I do interviews, they could go upwards of 45, upwards of fucking an hour and a half. Some of them go if we get particularly heated on a topic, which does happen. So thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe. All of our social media platforms. I'm going to mention them again. Instagram at Winters Dozen FFL. Twitter at Winters Dozen FFL. That's WINTERSDOZEN 12. Or wait, fuck. All right, don't listen to what I just said. At Winters Dozen FFL. So that is WINTERSDOZEN FFL. Woo! Fucking did it. Ric Flair woo that one. All right, bitches. Hit us up and we'll listen to you soon. We'll talk to you soon. We'll hear you soon. All right, peace out.